Driving down the familiar gravel road toward my childhood home, I felt that warm flutter of anticipation you get when you are about to share good news with family. The lake house my grandmother Eleanor left me shimmered in the distance, its wraparound porch catching the golden afternoon light just like it had every summer of my life. I could not wait to tell my parents about my new promotion at the marketing firm. But something felt off. There was a bright red "Sold" sign planted right in front of my grandmother's house. My heart skipped, but I told myself there had to be some mistake. Before we dive into what happened next, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If this story about family betrayal and the fight for what is rightfully yours resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, you will want to see how this unfolds. I pulled into my parents' driveway, my mind still spinning from that red sign. Walking through the front door, I was greeted by the sight of my 26-year-old sister Sophia, twirling in an elaborate ivory wedding dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. The living room had been transformed into a bridal showcase with fabric samples, flower arrangements, and wedding magazines scattered everywhere. "Clara, you are just in time," my mother Linda called out, her voice bright with excitement. "Look at how stunning Sophia looks in her Vera Wang." My father, Robert, emerged from the kitchen carrying champagne flutes. "We are celebrating the final dress fitting. The wedding is going to be absolutely magnificent." I tried to smile, but the image of that "Sold" sign kept flashing in my mind. "Mom, Dad, I need to ask you something. There was a "Sold" sign in front of Grandmother Eleanor's lake house. What is that about?" The room went quiet for a moment. Sophia stopped twirling, and my parents exchanged a quick glance that I caught but pretended not to notice. "Oh, that!" Robert said, clearing his throat. "We can talk about that later. Right now, we are focusing on Sophia's big day. Did you know the photographer we hired has shot weddings for celebrities, and the venue at Hillcrest Manor can accommodate 300 guests?" Linda nodded enthusiastically. "The wedding planner says it will be the event of the season. Sophia deserves nothing but the best." I looked around the room at all the expensive wedding paraphernalia. Crystal centerpiece samples sat on the coffee table next to leather-bound vendor portfolios. A 3-ring binder labeled "Dream Wedding" lay open, revealing page after page of high-end service providers. "That is wonderful for Sophia," I said carefully, "but I really need to understand about the lake house. Grandmother left it specifically to me in her will. The deed has my name on it." Robert set down his champagne glass and rubbed the back of his neck. "Clara, honey, you know how much this wedding means to our family. Sophia has been planning it since she was a little girl." "That does not answer my question about the house." Sophia finally spoke up, her voice carrying that entitled tone I remembered from our teenage years. "Clara, you have always been so selfish about that old house. You barely even visit it anymore since you moved to the city." "That is not true, and even if it were, Grandmother left it to me." Linda stepped forward, her expression becoming more serious. "We need to talk about this as a family. The truth is, we did sell the lake house, but we had good reasons." My stomach dropped. "You sold my house. How is that even possible?" Robert cleared his throat again. "We needed the money for Sophia's wedding. A wedding this special requires significant investment, and we wanted to give our daughter the fairy tale she deserves." I stared at them in disbelief. "You sold my inheritance to pay for a party." "It is not just a party," Sophia snapped. "It is the most important day of my life. And anyway, it is just a house. You can buy another one someday when you get married if you ever do." The casual cruelty of that comment hit me like a physical blow. Linda nodded in agreement with her younger daughter. "Sophia is right, dear. A wedding only happens once, but houses can be replaced. We thought you would understand." I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. This was not just any house they had sold. This was the place where Grandmother Eleanor had taught me to fish, from the old wooden dock where we had spent countless summer afternoons picking blackberries and watching thunderstorms roll across the water. It was where she had told me stories about our family history and made me promise to always stay true to myself. "I need to know exactly how much you spent and what you used my house money for," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Linda walked over to an organized file box and pulled out a thick folder. She opened it with the pride of someone showing off a prized possession. The venue at Hillcrest Manor is $45,000 for the reception hall gardens and bridal suite. She began reading from a detailed spreadsheet. Catering for 300 guests with premium menu selections is $35,000. The photographer and videographer package is $15,000. Floral arrangements and decorations are $18,000. Sophia's dress and accessories total $12,000. The live band and DJ for dancing is $25,000. She looked up at me expectantly, as if I should be impressed. That brings us to exactly $150,000 for a truly memorable celebration. I did quick math in my head. The lake house had sold for $160,000, according to local property records I had checked online. They had used almost every penny of my inheritance for this wedding. "You spent my entire inheritance on one day," I said quietly. "Our daughter's wedding day," Robert corrected. "And there will be photos and memories to last a lifetime." Sophia emerged from behind a privacy screen where she had been changing out of the wedding dress. She wore a smug expression that made my chest tighten with anger. "Clara, you have never understood family priorities," Sophia said carefully, hanging the expensive gown on a padded hanger. "You have always been wrapped up in your own little world. When I get married, I become part of a new family, and this wedding represents our family's status in the community." "What about my status? What about my rights?" "You are 32 years old and still single," Sophia shot back. "You do not have anyone to impress with a fancy house. I have a fiancé, future in-laws, and a real adult life starting." Robert nodded in agreement with his younger daughter. "Sophia has always been more family-oriented than you, Clara. She understands that sometimes we make sacrifices for the people we love." The word sacrifices echoed in my head. They were asking me to sacrifice my inheritance, my connection to my grandmother, my sense of security so that Sophia could have an elaborate party. And they seemed to genuinely believe I should be grateful for the opportunity to contribute. "I need some time to process this," I said, standing up to leave. As I walked toward the door, memories of my grandmother flooded back. I could see her clearly sitting in her favorite rocking chair on the lake house porch during my last visit before she passed away 2 years ago. She had been in her 80s, but still sharp as ever. "Clara, honey, come sit with me," she had said that day. "I want to talk to you about something important." We had sat together watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and pink. That was when she had pulled out the deed to the house and placed it in my hands. "This house represents 4 generations of our family," she had told me. "My grandmother built it, my mother expanded it, I maintained it, and now I am passing it to you, not because you are the oldest grandchild, but because you understand what it means to preserve something precious." She had looked directly into my eyes with an intensity that still gave me chills. "Promise me you will never let anyone take this away from you, Clara. Family can disappoint you sometimes, but this house will always be your sanctuary." I had promised her that day, holding the deed with trembling hands. Now, walking to my car in my parents' driveway, I realized I had failed to keep that promise. The house was already sold, the money already spent, and my family was acting like I should thank them for the privilege of funding my sister's extravagant wedding. But as I sat in my car, something shifted inside me. My grandmother had not just left me a house. She had left me a legacy, and I was not going to let it disappear without a fight. I drove home to my apartment that night with a strange mixture of devastation and determination coursing through my veins. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, I decided to channel my energy into understanding exactly what had happened and whether there was anything I could do about it. The next morning, I called the law office of Patricia Wells, an estate attorney I had found online with excellent reviews. Her assistant scheduled an emergency consultation for that afternoon. "I need to understand the legal implications of what my family did," I explained to Patricia across her polished wooden desk. "Can parents sell property that belongs to their adult child?" Patricia reviewed the documents I had brought. The deed clearly showed my name as the sole owner of the lake house property. My grandmother's will had been properly executed and filed with probate court. "This is quite concerning," Patricia said, adjusting her reading glasses. "In order for your parents to sell property titled in your name, they would have needed your signature on multiple documents, including the sales contract and the deed transfer." I never signed anything, I told her firmly. Patricia pulled out a thick file folder. Let me make some calls and see what documents were filed with the county recorder's office. Within 2 hours, she called me back with information that made my blood run cold. Clara, someone forged your signature on the deed transfer documents. I am looking at copies right now, and the signature does not match the one on file from when your grandmother's will was probated. What does that mean legally? It means your parents committed fraud, and the sale of the house is not legally valid. That evening, I drove back to my parents' house for what they thought would be a family dinner to smooth over our earlier conversation. I had told them I wanted to apologize and support Sophia's wedding plans. They welcomed me with open arms, believing they had successfully manipulated me into compliance. I am so glad you came around, Linda said, giving me a hug. Family harmony is so important, especially with the wedding only 6 weeks away. I brought some champagne to celebrate, I said, pulling out a bottle I had picked up on the way over. As we sat around the dinner table, Sophia regaled us with updates about final wedding preparations. The invitations had been sent to 293 guests. The cake tasting had resulted in a 5-tier vanilla and raspberry creation costing $2,000. The honeymoon to Italy was already booked. You know what the best part is, Sophia said, raising her champagne glass. None of this would have been possible without Clara's generous wedding gift. Robert laughed and raised his own glass. To Clara's house, which became Clara's gift to her sister. Thanks for the wedding present, Clara, Sophia added with a giggle that felt like a knife in my heart. I smiled and raised my own glass. You are absolutely welcome. I hope you all remember this moment. In fact, I have one more surprise for the family. Another gift? Linda asked excitedly. Not exactly, I said, my smile never wavering. I think you should all check your mail when you get a chance. I had some important documents delivered today. The conversation continued around the table, but I noticed Robert glancing toward the front hallway where the mail pile sat on the entry table. Sophia was too wrapped up in wedding talk to pay attention, but Linda caught my eye with a questioning look. After dinner, as we sat in the living room, I decided it was time. Dad, did you check the mail yet? I asked innocently. Robert got up and walked to the hallway. I heard him shuffling through envelopes, then complete silence. When he returned, his face was pale and he was holding 3 official-looking documents. What is it, honey? Linda asked. Robert's hands were actually shaking as he handed her the papers. I watched Linda's expression change from curiosity to confusion to absolute horror as she read. What does this mean? She whispered. Sophia grabbed the documents from her mother's hands. As she read, her face went through the same transformation, finally settling on rage. You filed a lawsuit against us, Sophia screamed. Your own family. I filed a fraud report with the district attorney's office, I said calmly. I also contacted the buyer of the house to inform them about the forged documents, which makes the sale legally void. And I sent notification letters to all of your wedding vendors about the potential legal issues surrounding your payment source. The room erupted in chaos. Robert was pacing back and forth, Linda was crying, and Sophia was shouting about how I was ruining her life. The wedding is 6 weeks away, Sophia yelled. You cannot do this to me now. You did this to yourself when you decided to steal my inheritance, I replied. And yes, I can absolutely do this. In fact, I already did. Linda wiped her eyes and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. How could you be so vindictive toward your own sister? How could you commit fraud against your own daughter? I shot back. You forged my signature, stole my property, and then mocked me about it. Did you really think there would be no consequences? Robert slumped into his chair, the legal documents scattered around his feet. What happens now? Now we see how this plays out, I said. The district attorney will decide whether to file criminal charges. The civil lawsuit will determine whether the house sale can be reversed, and your wedding vendors will decide whether they want to continue working with clients who are under investigation for fraud. I stood up to leave, but Sophia blocked my path. I will never forgive you for this, she said, her voice full of venom. You have destroyed everything I worked for. No, I said quietly. I am protecting what grandmother worked for. She left me that house for a reason, and I promised her I would never let anyone take it away. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, family drama, and unexpected consequences. Within 3 days of receiving my legal notifications, 5 of Sophia's major wedding vendors had canceled their contracts. The venue, photographer, florist, band, and caterer all cited payment concerns and potential legal complications as reasons for backing out. Sophia and my parents tried desperately to find replacement vendors, but word had spread quickly through the tight-knit wedding industry community. No reputable service provider wanted to get involved with a wedding funded by potentially fraudulent money. The buyer of the lake house, a young couple from Chicago, initially threatened their own lawsuit against my parents for misrepresentation. However, after meeting with me and learning the full story, they agreed to rescind the purchase contract in exchange for the return of their down payment. My parents faced a terrible choice. They could return the house sale money to resolve the fraud charges, but that would mean losing all the deposits they had already paid to wedding vendors, or they could fight the legal action and risk serious criminal charges. Patricia Wells kept me informed of every development. The forged signature was so obvious to forensic handwriting experts that the district attorney was considering felony fraud charges against both Robert and Linda. "Your parents' attorney is asking if you would consider a settlement," Patricia told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "They would return the house to you and plead guilty to misdemeanor charges instead of felonies." "What about Sophia's wedding?" "That would be canceled. They have lost too much money in vendor deposits to afford a replacement celebration." I thought about Sophia's wedding dreams collapsing and felt a complicated mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She had never shown me an ounce of empathy about losing my grandmother's house, but I remembered the little girl who used to follow me around, asking to play games and hear bedtime stories. In the end, I agreed to the settlement with one additional condition. My parents had to attend family counseling and write formal apology letters acknowledging what they had done and why it was wrong. 6 months after that terrible family dinner, I stood on the wraparound porch of my grandmother's lake house holding the deed that was once again legally in my name. The young couple from Chicago had gracefully withdrawn their purchase offer, understanding that this property meant far more to me than just money. I had spent the past month renovating the house, repairing the damage from being empty, and cleaning away the remnants of the brief period when it belonged to someone else. Every room held memories of grandmother Eleanor, and I found myself talking to her spirit as I worked. "I kept my promise," I said aloud one evening as I sat in her old rocking chair watching the sunset. "It was not easy, and it cost me my relationship with most of my family, but I protected what you left me." Sophia had moved her wedding to a small chapel ceremony followed by dinner at a local restaurant. She had not spoken to me since the legal settlement was finalized. Robert and Linda attended the required counseling sessions, but our family relationships remained strained and formal. The apology letters they wrote were awkward and defensive, focusing more on their good intentions than on the actual harm they had caused. But they were a start, and Patricia had explained that rebuilding trust after betrayal takes time. As for me, I discovered something unexpected during those months of legal battles and family upheaval. Standing up for myself had given me a strength and confidence I had never experienced before. I was no longer the people-pleasing daughter who avoided conflict at any cost. I started hosting small gatherings at the lake house for friends and co-workers who appreciated its history and beauty. I planted a garden using seeds from flowers my grandmother had loved. I learned to repair the old dock and spent evenings fishing just like grandmother Eleanor had taught me. Family, I realized, is not automatically defined by blood relationships. True family consists of people who respect your boundaries, celebrate your successes, and support you through difficulties. Some of my closest friends had become more like family to me than my actual relatives. The lake house was no longer just a symbol of my inheritance. It had become a symbol of my willingness to fight for what mattered to me. Every morning when I woke up in the same bedroom where my grandmother had told me stories about our family history, I felt connected to something larger than myself. Now, when I sit by that lake, I hear my grandmother's voice in the wind, reminding me that some gifts are worth fighting for and some battles define who we really are. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought to protect your inheritance, or would you have let family pressure convince you to give it up? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story reminded you that sometimes standing up for yourself is the most loving thing you can do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their boundaries matter and their voice deserves to be heard. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your inheritance, whether it is property values or dreams, is worth protecting. Until next time, keep fighting for what matters to you.